Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news for the Ole Miss Rebels in the transfer portal as Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, continue to get it done. Late Friday night, they land one of the best edge rushers in the country from last year, Princely Umanmielen, coming over from the Florida Gators. This is a guy that we talked about earlier in the week. And what Ole Miss is doing in the transfer portal is setting them up to have a special season in 2024. Obviously, Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, Quinshon Junkins, Caden Prescorn, all running it back on offense. And you look at what they're doing on the defensive side of the football. This is an Ole Miss defense that got better last year, and I think you're going to see it take another step in 2024. The boys are fired up. Nothing we'd rather be talking about Friday night than Ole Miss getting better on the defensive side of the football. Excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. There has been a ton of support from the Ole Miss fans as we've breaking down pretty much all of the additions in the transfer portal for the Rebels. Cannot thank you guys enough. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Princely U, heading to Ole Miss. How are we feeling?
I mean, this is kind of the missing piece. And even if you look back to what we were talking about last year with this Ole Miss defensive front, we kind of were thinking like, oh, are they going to get that preeminent big-time edge rusher? And they never quite hit on it. And they had good physical players. The inside was really, really tough. And you saw like the noticeable improvement in terms of like looking more like an SEC defensive line. But they didn't have that premier pass rusher. I think they got him. I'm surprised this guy's not going to the draft. So huge.
That's I mean, like starting off with Princely U as the player, this guy would have been arguably a top 150 pick. You take a look at what Princely U did last year, 28 quarterback hurries, a pass rush win rate of 20.8%. If you were to compare that to a guy in Dallas Turner from Alabama, who all Ole Miss fans are familiar with, I mean, those are identical numbers. And Dallas Turner is going to go top 15 in the NFL draft. Dallas Turner finished with a 20% pass rush win rate and 31 hurries. That's kind of just paints a little bit of the picture of how much Princely U can be a difference maker at Ole Miss. And Dill, I think you hit the nail right on the head. This guy is a premier pass rusher, not only in the SEC, but in the country. And what it sounds like or feels like, it kind of that missing piece coming off the edge.
Because again, we talked about it. I thought they did a really good job disrupting guys, but they maybe didn't quite have the sack numbers you wouldn't want. Now you have a guy who can win and pick up sacks. Like he can fill it up on the stat sheet. And again, stats are stats, but if you watch college football, you know how important sacks are. If you watch the Ole Miss play offense for the first 4 games, you know how detrimental sacks can be. So again, have a guy you can add to this defensive line to be really, really dominant and like actually kind of finish the job, if you will, and make those.
Yeah, and it's like no knock on a guy like Jared Ivy or Cedric Johnson, who were really quality edge defenders for Ole Miss. Like Princely U's special. He's an All-American caliber edge rusher, not only just first-team All-SEC caliber guy, he legitimately All-American guy. And this kind of goes with the trend that we kind of talked about throughout the 2023 season. And this Ole Miss defense last year in 2023 felt different, right? The first couple of years when Lane Kiffin took over it, they were winning games by scoring a lot of points, and that defense didn't have that many difference makers. It didn't really look like an upper echelon SEC defense. You look at 2023, some massive steps in the right direction. And what they're doing in 2024 with the guys that they're loading up on, like this is it going to be one of the better fronts in the SEC? Because I certainly think it could be.
And I was kind of like, I'll admit, I was kind of laughing at you a little bit when you were like kind of saying like, look out what Ole Miss is doing. I was like, oh, they're putting together a good class. And like, you're kind of right. This is shaping out to be one of those. I mean, they're going to be super, super dangerous last year. And they were great last year. It's not like they had a bad season by any means, but it didn't really feel like they were quite contending for that national championship.
Well, level. You saw it, right? When they go and play Georgia, like they just didn't have the guys up front specifically on the line of scrimmage. And I think Lane Kiffin sees that and says, yeah, we got to fix that. We have a lot of pieces that are college football playoff national championship caliber, right? Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, Quinshon Junkins. I can't think of that many other quarterback, running back, wide receiver trios that are as good as that. And the offensive line I thought was pretty solid most of the year. And then you look at this defense, I mean, it's a massive checked box still. I want to, before we talk about Ole Miss and kind of where they are on defense, let's just take a quick peek at the 2024 schedule, because I don't think it's a coincidence that Lane Kiffin and this Ole Miss program are kind of busting out all the stops for this 2024 year. Like when you are able to run it back with Quinshon Judkins, Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, and all the other guys, Caden Prescorn, JJ Pegas, Jared Ivey, like this has the bones of being a special season. And Dill, when you look at this schedule, it's gettable.
I mean, they're putting themselves in a position, and you kind of look at I think Bud Elliott. I saw him tweet on Twitter, like you kind of can maybe start looking out and like, okay, this is going to be
our year.
We're really going to have a great opportunity. And you're right, this just isn't a brutal schedule compared to what you can get from the SEC. They're getting a lot of games at home that they probably would like to get at home, and just not necessarily playing the top dogs of that conference. Right.
And you go through it, right? Furman, Middle Tennessee, at Wake Forest. Unfortunately, my alma mater going to take a loss there. Georgia Southern, Kentucky at home. You got to have them favorite. At South Carolina, no Spencer Rattler. Ole Miss favorite. At LSU is going to be tricky, but there's no Jaden Daniels. There's no Malik Neighbors, and we're not really sure what that offense is going to look like. You get the bye week. You get Oklahoma at home. You go on the road to Arkansas. I think there's a great opportunity for them to run that undefeated, and then you have Georgia at home. That's the kicker, right? You're not playing Alabama. You're not going on the road to Athens. You get Georgia in Vaught Hemingway Stadium, and then you finish with on the road at the Florida Gators and Mississippi State at home. I look at the schedule, and I kind of have like a couple games highlighted, right? On the road at Death Valley, you get Oklahoma and Georgia at home. You look at the swing games, the games that Ole Miss needs to win to make the college football playoffs, which again, 12-team playoff. It's both games are at home, Georgia and Oklahoma.
I mean, you're right, because you can pretty much, with that type of schedule, you can lose 2 games. Everyone, I think, knows that. So if they just win 1 out of those 3, and you got to think they should probably, I would think they'd get 2, because it's hard to know. I mean, Georgia, I still think is going to be really good, but if you just beef up the physicality at Ole Miss a little bit, you're like kind of right on par with them. And again, we'll see what they become, but their defensive line and just wasn't that dominant unit. And I don't know if it'll be next year either. So there, you'll have your shot at Georgia. I don't think they're like that team that just marches through everyone and like burns it to the ground.
I agree with that, and I think this is going to be by far, from at least just looking at this on paper, and it doesn't sound like they're done. We'll talk about a few more targets for Ole Miss in just a second, but on paper, like this is by far the most talented team Lane Kiffin has had on both sides of the football. And I do think you look across the SEC landscape, and I don't know if I'm picking any teams like, yep, Ole Miss does not have a chance to beat Alabama and Georgia. And that's probably what's most exciting for Ole Miss fans is that gap's getting closed. You know what I mean? Every single year, Lane Kiffin's closing that gap between Georgia, between Alabama. You take a look at what they've done in the portal so far. This is their 6th commitment. You got Key Lawrence, a versatile guy in the back end. Jerquan Scott, one of the best group of 5 offensive linemen in the class. Lewis Moore, we talked about him. Big fan of him. Tavion Nicholson. Dill, you know Tavion Nicholson a little from Illinois. Very good in man coverage. And then you have one of the better linebackers in the SEC in Chris Paul Jr. Not only are they bringing in a lot of players, the quality of these additions are absolutely massive for the Rebs here.
And I don't think I've seen a team hit on linebackers out of the portal at the clip at Ole Miss.
They're automatic.
It's like they take these experienced vets from teams that are a notch essentially below what Ole Miss is, and then they take them and they play really, really good football. You've seen it now. I believe it's at least 2 straight years. It might have been
3. Going back to Chance Campbell coming over from, I believe, Maryland. Like they're just automatic with veteran backers coming in and playing really good football. And what I'll say about Chris Paul is I love the addition of Chris Paul right next to Perkins. Perkins is a guy that you want him to freelance a little bit. You want him to blitz him off the edge, send him in the A-gap. And you have like a kind of the all-SEC caliber linebacker, steady as they come in Chris Paul. It gives you a little bit more of that flexibility to let Perkins go impact the game like I think he certainly can going into year 2. And Dill.
And the guy who's Frankly and Paul, who's rangy enough to do it. Because if you you're talking about Spates doing that at LSU last year, and he didn't have that sideline to sideline ability. I mean, Chris Paul can go, and he's that type of guy you can kind of stick him and be there alone, and he can cover the whole field. He doesn't need to play just one half.
Dill, the most exciting conversation about all this, and this is not to underappreciate the addition of Princely U, and not his brother, Princely U, is I don't know if they're done yet. You've seen all the Lane Kiffin tweets. They're going, what do they say? They're going big fish hunting. Like that's what they're doing. And Dill, Walter Nolan getting the 2nd visit. I believe he'll be on campus in Oxford this weekend. if they land Walter Nolan, I might have to go and put a future bet on Ole Miss to win a national championship.
If they get Walter Nolan, that'd be as good of a portal class as especially
we've
on
ever seen.
The ball as we've seen. Because he's the number one guy. I think it's by far. This type of guy just doesn't transfer. He's playing in a big program. He's playing at an exceptionally high level. What happened at A&M happened, and now he's out there. And man, if they can pull him in, that's just such a dangerous defensive front. I don't know
that, especially because this is a guy that's probably one of the best, if not the best football player on the field at any given time at the position where Ole Miss wanted to take that jump, right? You saw kind of the lack of physicality along the line of scrimmage for the last couple of years for Ole Miss. And again, it's getting better. Walter Nolan, Princely U, those guys, JJ Pegas, you don't have that feeling for Ole Miss anymore. And I guess actually another one of your favorite players here, Tyler Barron, also going to be on campus. Another edge rusher that is elite numbers. He has a 19% pass rush win rate. So you're talking about Princely U, Tyler Barron, two of the best edge rushers in the SEC, potentially both winding up in Oxford. Now, Tyler Barron, there might be a little bit more ways to go, but that just kind of gives you the feel for what Ole Miss is. They ain't playing no games in the transfer portal this cycle.
No, and that's – yeah, it's got to be so exciting because you see what you're bringing back on offense. It's going to be a great group. To get a guy like Trey Harris back, I'm stunned he's coming back. I thought another guy was looking like, he kind of played himself.
That's the biggest part. Sorry to cut you off, but that was kind of what I was thinking. So one of the biggest aspects of the transfer portal is retaining your guys, playing roster defense too. And not only is Ole Miss going to other SEC schools and rating their best players, Ole Miss, the key playmakers for Ole Miss, they're not transferring. They're not leaving. And also, they're not going to the NFL draft. I think the sentiment in that locker room is 2024 can be a special year. So Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, they want to, Caden Prescorn, they want to run it back. They know they can do things special in 2024. We'll see how Lane Kiffin finishes out. It does get the vibe that he's just getting started here, going into the portal. Extremely fun times for the Ole Miss fans. Had to hop on Friday night, break it down again. Appreciate the Ole Miss fans rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.